London is proud, loud, hard as nails. Suited and booted, deep-rooted, undisputed. London is Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, Sikh. Magnifique. London is European, grand, wild, magical, nuts. London is hungry guts. Late night bagels, all the curry versed. Avocado on toast, Sunday roast. London is non-stop, around the clock, grime and rap.
Mind the gap.
London is fearless, outrageous, courageous, spacious, expressive, impressive, the history, the future. London is anyone. London is everyone. London is open.
It's time to back the plaque and make sure more women get the recognition they deserve.
I was just looking, I've got a guy here on Twitter who logs a lot of the tweets about cyclists. When I'm driving and I see a cyclist, I always want to swerve into them and nudge them off.
People don't like to be medicalised, they don't want labels.
Suffering with depression, I'm always indoors. All I want to do is stay indoors. And when the doctor suggested that, it helped me a lot with my depression.
If the government put him on a domestic abuse register, it could save a lot of other women and possibly save their life.
London is proud, loud, hard as nails. Suited and booted, deep-rooted, undisputed. London is Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, Sikh. Magnifique. London is European, grand, wild, magical, nuts. London is hungry guts. Late night bagels, all the curry versed. Avocado on toast, Sunday roast. London is non-stop, around the clock, grime and rap.
Mind the gap.
London is fearless, outrageous, courageous, spacious, expressive, impressive, the history, the future. London is anyone. London is everyone. London is open.
It's time to back the plaque and make sure more women get the recognition they deserve.
I was just looking, I've got a guy here on Twitter who logs a lot of the tweets about cyclists. When I'm driving and I see a cyclist, I always want to swerve into them and nudge them off.
People don't like to be medicalised. They don't want labels.
Suffering with depression, I'm always indoors. All I want to do is stay indoors. And when the doctor suggested that, it helped me a lot with my depression.
If the government put him on a domestic abuse register, it could save a lot of other women and possibly save their life.
London is proud, loud, hard as nails. Suited and booted, deep-rooted, undisputed. London is Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, Sikh. Magnifique. London is European, grand, wild, magical, nuts. London is hungry guts. Late night bagels, all the curry verse. Avocado on toast, Sunday roast. London is non-stop, around the clock, grime and rap.
Mind the gap.
London is fearless, outrageous, courageous, spacious, expressive, impressive, the history, the future. London is anyone. London is everyone. London is open.
To look around and note the fire exit nearest to you. In the event of an emergency, please follow the instructions given by staff. Please switch your electronic devices to silent mode now, and if you wish to tweet about tonight's event, the hashtag is PQT. We have 6 topic areas this evening and we'll spend up to 20 minutes on each. This is how it works. For each topic, the chairman will take questions from those of you with your hands up. Please wait for a member of staff with a microphone to reach you before you speak. The chairman will take 3 questions at a time and will then direct your questions to the mayor or an assembly member. We have no advance notice of the questions. If you're able to stand to ask your question, the cameras and those on stage will find it easier to see you. Please do keep your questions short so we can get to as many of you as possible, and please ask questions rather than make speeches. With so many of you here, obviously we won't have the time to take everyone's question, so if you don't get to ask yours tonight, please give your question to one of the team in the foyer and we'll answer it later. Please also remember to fill in the feedback form and hand it to a member of staff at the end. We will finish tonight at 9 p.m. sharp. And now, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, please put your hands together for your chairman this evening, the Assembly Member for Bexley and Bromley, Gareth Bacon.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to what is the 38th People's Question Time, the first time that this event has ever been held in the London Borough of Bexley. It's the 6th People's Question Time of Sadiq Khan's rule as Mayor of London, and I have to say it's great to see so many of you here this evening. Now, I've got a few brief announcements to make before I introduce the London Assembly and the Mayor, and then we can take your questions to them both. The London Assembly and the Mayor work to improve the life of Londoners and make London a better place. People's Question Time is your chance to ask the Mayor and the Assembly members what they're doing for you and to raise any concerns that you have. Now, I think we're just about ready, so please first, could you welcome to the stage your London Assembly members? Okay, and now without any further ado, please could you welcome the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to kick off. Please, could you keep your questions short so that we can get to as many of you as possible? I know you heard the announcement earlier on about how we're going to do these things. Please ask questions rather than make speeches. I'll take questions from the audience 3 at a time, as this allows more questions to be asked and answered. I'd also ask the Mayor and Assembly members to keep their answers short and to the point so we can fit as much in as possible. To the audience, please listen to the questions and answers with respect and dignity and do not heckle or disrupt the meeting. I'm aware that the announcement came out before that your electronic devices should already be in silent mode. I'd like to extend that instruction to my colleagues on the Assembly and to the Mayor. And before we begin with your questions, there's a few introductory words from the Chairman of the London Assembly and then the Mayor. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Chairman of the London Assembly, Tony Arbour, will now address the meeting for up to 5 minutes. Tony.
Thank you, Gareth. It's nice to be in Bexley. The London Assembly likes to attend every London borough. This is the first time we have come to you in Bexley, and we found the journey really very interesting and exciting coming here to Bexley. I have to say I'm from southwest London, and your trains were infinitely more crowded than the ones I'm accustomed to. The Assembly is elected at the same time as the Mayor. It's our function to hold the Mayor to account. I'd like to say that we invariably do this, but whether or not you think that we hold him to account, it is our job to speak for you and on your behalf. And among the matters that we have been dealing with, which have been concerning us and I know have been concerning the Mayor as well, has been the increasing tide of violence in London. We are very anxious, together with the Mayor, who of course is responsible with the Home Secretary for the Metropolitan Police, to bring this under control. We are very concerned with seeing that the London Ambulance Service is working properly. We're looking to see that transport flows well in London. We're very anxious to see that Crossrail actually turns up, it turns up on time. We're constantly lobbying for things which we think will improve the lot of Londoners. For example, we're looking at having a domestic abusers register. This is a kind of undercurrent which really affects Londoners deeply, as a kind of London-wide thing which the Assembly is actually doing on its own account, and we do very little on our own account. We're seeking to have a proper blue plaque scheme for Londoners, where Londoners will recognise people who are recent contemporaries of ours. Hitherto, the rule has been that you have to have been dead for 20 years, and the building that the plaque is put on has to still be in existence. We think this is extremely restrictive, given the way that London is consistently changing, and I'm very hopeful that there will be some plaques here in Bexley. We like to think that people will be watching us on television. I have to say it's something I've never done myself, and I've often thought it's probably something that only one does when one wants to sleep. It's really quite harmless. We have a Twitter account. Our Twitter account is Twitter at London Assembly. Hope you use it. Hope you pay attention. This looks like being the fullest house that we have had for one of these meetings, and I thank Gareth for marshalling the troops who are here this evening. That sounds rather odd, doesn't it, really? I know you've all come of your own accord because you're very interested in holding the Mayor to account, just as we do. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much, Assemblymember Arbour. I now invite the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, to give an opening address, also of 5 minutes. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Gareth. We all know Gareth as a chair. Just to warn you, he's a tough chair, and if any of you speak too long, you'll see the remnants of Storm Gareth this evening. So word to the wise there. Can I thank you all for coming this evening? I understand one of the local MPs, Theresa Pearce, is also here, as is the leader of Bexley Council, Theresa O'Neill. It is great to be back in the beautiful borough of Bexley. As Gareth and Tony have said, we are making history tonight. People's Question Time has been going for 19 years now. This is the first time that we've been in Bexley, and it's good to be part of that history making tonight. This event, as the title suggests, is about you rather than me. It's your opportunity as Londoners to tell me what you think about our city and to ask me and Assembly members any questions you have about the work we're doing on your behalf to deliver real results for all Londoners. Before we get started, I do want to set out some of the key things we're delivering on your behalf. The last 2.5 years have been tough for London. We've had terrorist attacks. We've had the shameful tragedy of the Grenfell Tower fire, the chaos of Brexit, and continued government cuts which have hit our police force and youth services hard, contributing to a national rise in violent crime. For many Londoners, the future doesn't look easy. Families are struggling to make ends meet. The housing crisis is preventing Londoners from buying their own homes, and our wonderful diversity is under attack, not just here in London, but from around the world. I could promise you tonight that I'll click my fingers and fix these problems overnight, but it simply wouldn't be true. Some of these problems have been decades in the making and will take some time to fix, and others need extra funding and powers that we currently don't have in London. But that doesn't mean there's no hope. Far from it. I remain optimistic about our future because over the last 2.5 years, despite these major challenges, we've made real progress in delivering for London. We've laid the foundations to build a better city that works for all Londoners. This includes building more social homes than ever before, giving residents the right to vote on estate regeneration plans, introducing the Hopper bus fare and freezing Transport for London fares, making transport more affordable for millions of Londoners, supporting boroughs to build 14,000 new council homes over the next 4 years, tackling London's dangerously polluted air, which is harming the health of our children, protecting the Green Belt, and loudly and proudly standing up for London's values, defending our diversity and respect for one another in the face of an increasingly divided world. I'm also continuing to lobby the government to devolve commuter rail lines such as South Eastern to Transport for London so that we can improve the services for passengers who commute from places like Bexley. My ambition is the same today as it was when I first became the mayor. For every Londoner to get the opportunity to get on in life that our city gave to me and my family. We've made a good start, but as ever, there's much more still to do. One key priority for me, and the Chair Tony Arbour referred to this, is tackling violent crime, which is unacceptably high. Every death or injury as a result of violent crime is an utter tragedy, leaving lives destroyed and families heartbroken. I'm not excusing criminality, but the causes of crime are complex and involve deep-seated problems like poverty, social alienation, inequality, mental health, and the lack of opportunities for young people. But all these problems have been made much worse by huge government cuts to our police, youth, and preventative services since 2010. As Mayor, I'm leading from the front on this issue. I'm working with the Met Police by funding a new violent crime task force, which is catching those responsible in the areas of London that are worst affected. And I'm working with councils, communities, and schools on our new violence reduction unit, which is focusing on tackling the root causes of violent crime. But we all have a responsibility to do everything possible to end the scourge once and for all. Let me end by saying this. There's clearly so much more to do to ensure that our city works for all Londoners. But we've made some good progress over the last 2.5 years, and I'm determined to keep up that pace of change for the benefit of the residents of Bexley and for Londoners across our great city. Thank you, and I look forward, as we all do, to answering your questions. Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to take your questions. The first section is transport. I won't take questions that aren't transport related, so please do restrict your questions to transport. This section will continue until 7:33, so we've got around about 20 minutes. So if you'd like to ask questions, please raise your hands. We've got some roving mics, and I'll direct them to you as I see you. So first, from paddle number 3, the first man I saw was a gentleman sitting about 3 in from the end with his hand raised, blue jumper, red top. Paddle number 4, if you can come forward, the gentleman at the end of that row. And paddle number, I think that's 2, there's a gentleman just there in your eye line who's got his hand still. Keep your hand up, please, sir, with the, it looks like a grey T-shirt. So, first question.
Good evening, Sadiq. Knife crime is a very difficult problem, but hundreds of people are getting killed on the roads, and you're supposed to have a Safer Junctions programme which is dealing with that. So will you please tell TfL to expedite that programme, and especially to stop wasting their time and our money on modelling? 73 major junctions have been identified as unsafe, but TfL are only tackling 4 or 5 a year, which will take, at that rate, 15 years, by which time I'll be dead or past caring. So surely they can tackle 15 a year or so. Redesign isn't difficult and shouldn't take so long. The number one delay factor is TfL's traffic modelling, the sole purpose of which seems to be to defend the status quo. It's only a forecast, it's not fact. And as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, Sadiq, you never said to TfL, fix these 73 junctions only if your computer says it's okay to do so. As far as I'm aware, both yourself and Boris said these are high priority and they must be fixed. But TfL are vetoing safe designs because their computer says no. So can you please put a stop to that and please tell them to just get on with it? Thank you.
Okay. Paddle number 4.
Hi, good evening. My name's Roy Brinkley. I'm a veteran of this country. My question is not about transport. And that's the reason I can't stay here all day or night.
Sorry, sir.
Because I've been on my feet at the Supreme Court supporting veterans today.
Sorry, sir.
I want to know from the London Mayor.
No, sorry, sir.
Why
sorry, please, can we take the microphone back? Can we cut off microphone 4, please? You can ask your question later on, sir. There is a section at the end. There is a section at the end of the meeting where you can ask questions that are not related to anything on the agenda, but you can't do it now. There are lots of other people here who want to ask a question. Paddle number 2, please.
Hi, Sadiq. This government has cut children's university fees, they've cut children's cares, their grants, they've cut children in a way I've never seen them cut before. Chukwu Ramuna now is saying, I want to bring back national service.
So is this a question about transport? If it's not, I'm going to have to ask you to sit down as well. I'll come back to you later. There's a section at the end where you can ask any questions about anything else. But this is the transport section, so we have to have questions on transport. I'll take 2 further questions. Gentleman in the middle near paddle 3 with the orange tie. And let's go to this side. There's I think it's a lady with glasses near paddle 7. At the end of the row in front of you, dark hair, glasses, looks like a white top. So, first question, I took gentleman standing with the orange tie.
It's interesting that you started by mentioning the TfL fare freeze. In here, south of the river, the panel may notice we're in zone 5 this evening. Someone living not a million miles away, just north of the river, will pay, starting a journey on National Rail, going to Zone 1 tube station, 30% less than anyone from Bexley Heath station. Because of the oyster fare differential, the TfL fare freeze does not affect south of the river. In light of the fact that bus services are being cut, This borough does not have any tube stations, and there is no capital funding for an East London River crossing currently. When will the Assembly set a transport policy that is fair to all Londoners?
Okay, we'll take the final section and we'll get some answers. Madam?
Sir.
Sir, I beg your pardon. I can't see very far, it's very light.
Similarly to the other gentleman's question, aside from devolution, are you in TfL exploring any other realistic options for expanding TfL rail services into Bexley? Because we are, as he said, one of the boroughs with no tube, no overground, no DLR.
Mr. Mayor.
Can I thank you all for your questions on transport? Just to say that all the questions you raised are really important. I'll deal with each one at a time. First, the question about the frustration about the delay in relation to zero vision is really important. I've got the numbers here. Last year, there were 110 fatalities on our road. The year before, 131, and numerous numbers of serious injuries. What TfL are doing now is trying to accelerate the pace of progress, not just on junctions, but also making it easier for cyclists and pedestrians. Those are the two biggest groups affected, plus those riding motorbikes as well. It's not about, and we've got to make sure we don't blame the victim. It's not the pedestrian's fault or the cyclist's fault or the motorcyclist's fault. It's about making sure the design is done in a way to minimise road traffic accidents. And so the good news is, in the most recent business plan published by TfL, we are spending record amounts in relation to road safety. The phrase Vision Zero is about making sure over the next few years we have zero numbers of fatalities or serious injuries. You'll have seen the 20 is Plenty campaign. So in addition to the work we're doing around the physical infrastructure, we're also trying to change behaviour as well. I'll make the one point though. The TfL are frustrated because they want to go faster, but often these roads aren't TfL roads. And when they try and take action, the council says you can't do it. 95% of the roads in our city are not controlled by TfL, but are controlled by councils. We've had examples of some councils taking us to court to stop making our roads safer. And so it's frustrating for TfL and for me, but we're going to carry on working and working as fast as we can to make sure we work with a coalition of the willing to make our roads as safe as we possibly can. In relation to the fares freeze mentioned, you're right. Because of the way the franchise system works, there are many private train operating companies making obscene amounts of profits with trains being cancelled, trains being delayed, and since I've become mayor, their fares have gone up by more than 8.8%. At the same time, we've managed to improve services on TfL services and have frozen TfL fares for the last 3 years. So a message to the government was quite simple. If we are able to freeze our fares and provide a good service, why can't you make those privatised train operating companies do the same? And the short answer is the government could do something very, very easy straight away. Give us those commuter lines and let us run those services. We'd have fewer cancellations, we'd have fewer delays, plus you'd benefit from the TfL fares freeze if we ran those. And the only person stopping us doing that is a man called Christopher Grayling. And that's why if you want to make sure you get the services other parts of London receive on TfL lines, work with us to lobby Chris Grayling to have those franchise systems run by TfL rather than failing privatised train operating companies. I think the service South Eastern provides is a disgrace, and it's really important. And that's linked with the third question somebody asked about what are our plans for Bexley. I'm really pleased to be making history today and being in Bexley for people's question time. We need to improve public transport in Bexley. A number of things we are doing. We're trying to increase the number of buses in outer London by making sure that we move the buses from central London, where there are too many in some parts, to outer London and improve the services here. But also we're working with the council. We've submitted in relation to a business plan to improve some of the services coming into not just Abbey Wood but elsewhere as well. So we're working with the council in relation to an opportunity area to have a DLR extension. We're working with the council in relation to maybe extending the London Overground, because that will help the council in relation to their ambitious plans for some parts of the borough. It's really important that we make sure we have decent public transport and decent infrastructure in this forgotten part of London. You've got my promise that I'll be a mayor for all Londoners, including Bexley as well.
Okay, I'll take another set of 3 questions, please. Okay, I can see a hand right in front of paddle number 6. It's gentleman, I think. Hang on, I got that wrong last time. Gentleman with glasses. There's a man standing up right next to paddle 3. We'll go there. And I saw there's a man with a rolled-up magazine right at the back. Could we take paddle 4 there, please? No, move on. No, moving on. It's rolled up magazine. Paddle number 4, I think it's the next chap along. Yeah, that's the chap. Okay, first question, please. Paddle number 6.
Me? Wow. Sorry, I didn't realise. Can I stay sitting? Thank you. What's happening to the lifts in all of the stations that Ken Livingstone promised to give us?
Okay, nice short question. Paddle number 3 was next.
My question is about can London afford a £400 million new vanity bridge at Rotherhithe as opposed to using a much cheaper ferry option?
Okay, and paddle number 4.
I have 2 things to pick up with the mayor there. He says he's diverting more buses to South London, but yet key corridors between Bromley and Bexley have had service reductions of about 20% since he became mayor. I had to wait 21 minutes for a bus today that's meant to come every 12 minutes, which is unacceptable. He says that if he gets more powers devolved, then Transport for London services will improve. This is the front cover of the industry-leading Rail magazine, which this week covers his Gospel Oak Line crisis, where London Overground operate the line, but there's been a 50% service reduction because his plans are running a year late and he hasn't managed to get the trains there on time. So how can we rely on him to bring service improvements here in South London when he can't even deliver them between Gospel Oak and Barking?
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for those questions. The first question about step-free access is really important. If public transport is what it says on the tin, it's got to be transport for all the public. And that means making sure that our stations and our buses are accessible, particularly to those who are disabled, but also those who may be visually impaired and suffer hidden disabilities as well. The Deputy Mayor Heidi Alexander's here this evening. She's been working with groups across London to make sure their needs are met. So when I became mayor, for example, the London Underground, 25% of our stations only were step-free. And there's a very good reason for that. Many of our Victorian stations, more than 150 years old. Because of our increased investment in relation to step-free, by the end of the first mayoralty, first term, that'll go from 25% to 33%. And we want to accelerate that to 40% during the course of this business plan and the start of the next one. The good news in relation to London Overground, in relation to trams, in relation to 99% of our buses, in relation to the new Elizabeth line, all those are step-free and accessible to all Londoners, not just those who are physically able. And we're also, sir, training TfL staff so they are dementia-friendly in relation to some of the needs Londoners have as our population rises. And the needs of Londoners mean that we should provide better service for all Londoners, not just who are physically abled and not suffering from dementia. We're going to carry on investing in our staff as well in relation to making sure we provide the best possible service. We've made sure we improve the training of bus drivers as well to make sure bus drivers understand the needs of disabled passengers when they come on buses as well. Really, really important going forward. The next question was in relation to whether we're wasting money having additional river crossings in the southeast of London. That's in direct contradiction to the question raised over there about investment in the southeast and southwest and east of London. I don't apologise for wanting to make sure we have a cycle and a pedestrian bridge at Canary Wharf and Rotherhithe. Actually, it was one of the campaigns that Caroline Pidgeon talked about during the mayoral campaign. I was initially not sure of my views, was persuaded during the course of the mayoral campaign why it's a good idea, and then we've worked cross-party to make sure we get this scheme up and running. The Silvertown Tunnels scheme, was a scheme that began before I became mayor. We've improved it to make sure there is one lane reserved for buses. There'll be 37 buses going there during the course of an hour, including free travel from one side of the river to the other if you're on a bike or if you're a pedestrian, to try and improve links. The current situation is not acceptable. The status quo is not acceptable in relation to air quality, in relation to congestion, and in relation to challenges in that part of London. So I don't apologise for investing in river crossings, and the point I made in answer to the earlier question is we should be talking about more river crossings, whether it's DLR, whether it's London Overground, not less, particularly in the east of London. If you stand at Tower Bridge and look west, I think there are 18 river crossings. You look east, there are only 2, and I think that's fair. So we're working towards doing that. The last questioner was basically saying South Eastern are better than Transport for London. I don't agree, sir. I think Transport for London are one of the best public transport authorities in the world in relation to the services we provide, in relation to London Underground, in relation to our buses, in relation to trams, in relation to London Overground. We've also managed to freeze our fares over the last 2.5 years. In the 8 years before I became mayor, Transport London fares, TfL fares, went up by more than 42%, the most expensive public transport in all of Europe. In the last 2.5 years, we've managed to freeze them. At the same time, South Eastern and others have increased theirs by more than 9%. But you raise a good point in relation to buses. Many Londoners, particularly poorer Londoners, particularly those Londoners in outer London, rely upon a good bus service for 2 main reasons. There's no underground, but also South Eastern are so poor. And that's why we're invested in outer London in relation to our bus services. We currently have more than 30 buses running in Bexley, different routes. We want to improve the frequency of those services and have more buses in outer London. Just to give you an idea of the buses that we run, there are 19,000 bus stops in London, more than 9,700 buses, more than 675 routes. We want to make sure we have the buses where we need them, rather than a situation in central London. Look at London Bridge, look at Kingsway, look at Park Lane, and look at Oxford Street, where there are queues of buses back to back, empty because they're not needed there. Where they're needed is in parts of Bexley. And I'll ask you the simple question, who would you trust running public transport here? South Eastern, cancellations, delays, fares going up, or Transport for London? I know who I'd rather have running the services.
Okay, we have about 3 minutes left. Assembly Member Pigeon has indicated, so I'm going to briefly come to her, and then there's a lady right at the back next to paddle 4 who's had her hand up for the whole time. I'm going to come to her, and if there's any time after that, I'll take one more question. Assembly Member Pigeon.
Thank you very much indeed. I just want to pick up a few of the points that have come up. Step-free access is really important for Londoners to be able to use the transport network, and Crossrail, which we know has been delayed, but when it was first planned, was not going to be a step-free line in London. The first brand new line from east to west, and not every station would be step-free. And I'm really proud of the work the Assembly did to make sure that we secured every station to be step-free on that. And we need to make sure we see much more investment to enable all Londoners to use our transport network. The point that was made about the bridge, I think, is extraordinary. It's so important for pedestrians and cyclists to be able to cross the Thames. At the moment in this side of London, you have a choice. You go through the Rotherhithe Tunnel, literally taking your life into your own hands, or you have to trek east further and go through the Greenwich Foot Tunnels, which are already at capacity. We need to make sure that people can get across the Thames safely, and this is a really wonderful bridge that will connect the south of the river with the north of the river and allow people to get to work either by walking or cycling in a healthy, safe way. I think it's a fantastic project, and it will be a real triumph for London to see a brand new bridge at that location. In terms of Gospel Oak to Barking, I have to say it's been a problem from start to finish, this project. Network Rail were hugely to blame for delaying the electrification, and all those months of closures caused real pain to the commuters there. And now we see Bombardier unable to deliver the trains. Now clearly there are some issues for the management from Transport for London, but we need to make sure we get better across the public sector at delivering these projects so that passengers aren't delayed unnecessarily, and that we get that investment in. But finally, I just want to pick up the issue of buses in outer London. The Transport Committee recommended having far more express routes, particularly in outer London, connecting people to stations so they could carry on their journey into work. But we are seeing cuts in bus services, and this is where I disagree with the Mayor. His strategy says he wants a reduction in bus mileage by 7%. And whilst The talk is that more buses are going into outer London. The consultations I've seen for places like Croydon, places like Richmond don't show a growth. They see more cuts to bus services, and that's not what we need in outer London.
Okay, I'm going to... We are right up against time now, so I'm going to go to panel number 4 for the very final question. And if you could ask you to make the question punchy, and Mr. Mayor, if you can make your answer punchy as well, please.
I just want to contradict the Mayor Khan of saying that London is the best city in the world regarding transport. Has he ever been to the continent? Has he ever visited Munich, Berlin, Torino, Geneva? Perhaps, you know, he should really, before he makes comments like that, which are very hurtful to other cities, I don't think pollution in London is the highest in Europe. What's the mayor doing about that?
Okay.
Why are the...
Can I ask you to pause, because on that we do have a section on air quality and pollution and things like that. So, Mr. Mayor, could you answer the main points of the early part of that question?
Every single city you mentioned has a subsidy given from central government to their transport authorities. London is the only city in the world not subsidised by the government. So if you're to point the figure, madam, I'd point it at this government that's cut £700 million each year from Transport for London's budget.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time on transport. If we didn't get to your question, there is a team of officers around the building, and there'll be a box by the door. You can leave cards in there, and your question will be answered within 6 weeks. We now, I'm afraid, have to move on to the next section, which is safety. And so this will be relating to things like fire, police, etc. Okay, looking around the room. Paddle number 3, gentleman with the blue suit, blonde hair, just there. Paddle number 2, there's a gentleman, again, a blue shirt, dark hair. And I will take your question later on. Paddle number 1, the gentleman at the front with the beard. So, gentleman here first, then we'll go 2, then we'll go 1.
Mr. Mayor, you recently said that you had done all that you could to fund more police officers in London. I'm a bit confused by this statement because recently the GLA Conservative Group put forward an amendment to your budget that suggested cutting your PR budget, using that money to put 1,378 more officers on the street. Do we Londoners need more PR, or do we need more police officers on the street?
Paddle number 2.
Mr. Mayor, good evening. Will you commit to increasing the use of stop and search to protect more Londoners, or will you just continue to channel more and more of taxpayers' cash into your PR budget? Thank you.
And paddle number 1. Can we have the microphone next to the interpreter, please?
You talked about, my question is linked to transport and disabled people. You mentioned visually impaired people and other disabled people, but equally with the flat platform for the safety for deaf people, we can't follow the announcements when they're auditory. We can't hear them, so we need more written information coming at us to keep us safe.
I'll let that one in. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I mean, it's just worth understanding where we are in relation to police in numbers and then in relation to the consequences. So in the last 8.5 years, the Met Police Service has had to make cuts of more than £830 million, and we are, well no, it's the central government cut, not paid for PR, and we've got to make a further round of cuts of more than £200 million over the next 2 years. So we've lost £1 billion from the Met Police budget. The amount of police officers we have in London is less than we had in 2003, and the decline began before I became mayor. So we've lost thousands of police officers, more than 3,000. We've lost thousands of community support officers, and we've lost thousands of police staff. The 2 police stations that have been closed down in Bexley were closed down before I became the mayor. So, you know, I appreciate it's easy to point the finger at the Labour mayor, but actually those were closed down by a man called Boris Johnson, and he was the mayor before 2016. Now, in relation to the increase in violent crime, I'm afraid you're seeing it across the entire country. There is a very good reason why the chair of the National Police Chief Councils, Sarah Thornton, why the Chief Constable of West Midlands, why the Chief Constable of Greater Merseyside, Greater Manchester, and other leaders across the country demanded that the Chancellor increase resources for the police. It's not because across the country, all these police and crime commissioners, all these people are spending lots of money on marketing. It's because of central government cuts. And I think you can't disaggregate the cuts from central government and what we've seen in relation to crime across the country. We've seen youth centres closing down across London and across the country. We've seen after-school clubs closing down across London and across the country. We've seen police officer numbers closing down. And it's really important we understand why it's so important to invest in police and preventative services. So what have I done since I became mayor over the last 3 years? What I've done is maximise the amount of monies I spend on policing. In the 8 years before I became mayor, it is the case that the police precept for council tax didn't go up. It was frozen by the previous mayor, even though he knew there were cuts made from central government, no proper planning from the previous mayor. I've increased the council tax precept to the maximum allowed, but also used business rates money to invest in the police, but also young people as well. So we've had, since I became mayor, a City Hall funded violent crime task force, and it comes to the second question about stop and search, but also a Mayor's Young Londoners Fund, £45 million supporting young Londoners, because it's really important we support our police and young people as well. And the reality in relation to the second question is stop and search is a useful tool for our police. It is really useful when used properly. And the big game changer in London is since I became mayor, we've had the biggest rollout of body-worn videos of any city in the world. 21,000 body-worn videos. Now, why is that important? It's important because it gives police officers the confidence to use this valuable tool, knowing they can interact with the public, they can undertake a stop and search, and it's recorded, having the confidence to know there won't be what's called a vexatious complaint made against him or her. But also it reassures Londoners, knowing this interaction with the police will be recorded by a body-worn video, so there will be no misconduct on the part of the police. And you know what? Over the last few months since I've been mayor, we've seen an increase in the use of stop and search by the police. We've seen thousands of knives, guns and offensive weapons taken off our streets. We've seen more than 3,400 arrests. We've seen more than 6,000 weapon sweeps, but the number of complaints has stayed low and in fact gone down. And that's the game changer body-worn videos make. And the third question in relation to the service we provide, it's really important the police service, as indeed all public authorities, provide a good service for everyone, whether it's public transport or whether it's policing. So one of the things the police are doing is looking into technology and how we can use technology to provide a good service for all Londoners. We've seen, I'm afraid, over the last period, an increase in hate crime against disabled Londoners, as well as other Londoners. We're using technology to try and make sure the service that we provide is a better service for all Londoners.
Okay. Assembly members, any indications? Assembly member Bailey, and then I'll take another three. Assembly member Bailey.
The Mayor is no doubt, there's no doubt there's been a rise in crime in London, and of course we'd want more money. Which politician wouldn't want more money? But I think many of the measures that we have taken too long to arrive. There's many other things we could be doing now. We could be doing gang callings, knife amnesties. And when you talk about my Conservative group putting in something about how to raise police officers, it goes to the core of the thing. The GLA, under the Mayor, had the money already to get more police officers. We didn't have to wait. We waited too long. If you arrive to a position where you think there isn't enough police officers, fine, make it a priority and spend the money on it. You already have that money. We could have done it ages ago. We should be showing leadership in London to the rest of the country about how we respond to getting more police onto the streets.
Okay. Right, there are three people I've seen who's had their hands up the entire time. The first is the lady here. If paddle 3 could come forward. Lady in purple T-shirt. Then there's a lady over here with glasses in the front row, paddle number 5. And the final one is this gentleman here, paddle number 1, grey sweatshirt. So paddle number 3 is first.
Hi, with all the cuts to all emergency services, including fire brigade, to the police, how would I don't understand how the government would allow such a, can you tell me how you're going to deal with all the budget cuts with personal safety?
Paddle number 5.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. My name is Angela, and I'm from Brazil. And our community from South America would like to know when we can meet you to discuss the problems related with our community, especially related with the women's. And because just this year we have more than 5 people who died in this city related with the crime with knives. And we would like to speak with you about all these problems, just not about crime, but other situations related with our community from South America.
Okay, panel number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is relating to crime. There's been 75 murders in the past year, yet the committee there and City Hall are spending £169 million per year on cycle lanes. Now, just two years' worth of this money could solve the whole problem. If you were to postpone this for 2 years, that would be nearly 340 million. You could solve the policing problem as New York did 20 years ago. You could have 2 police officers on every street corner, outside every single address that these gangs operate from, and you could solve this problem. New York managed it, you could manage it. Only a small percentage of Londoners actually use the cycle lanes. Everyone here is affected by crime. Please man up and please do this. All get together and just postpone it for 2 years. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, we've got 8 minutes left on this section, and there's obviously a lot of people that want to ask more questions, so if we can keep our answers as concise as possible. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The first question was about personal safety, and the question was basically, bearing in mind all the cuts being made, how can we try and keep people safe in relation to personal safety? And I think I start from a basic premise, which is cuts have consequences. And if you're going to make cuts, there are consequences for making those cuts. So if you cut the fire budget and have fewer fire stations and fewer fire engines and fewer firefighters, don't be surprised when the response of the fire service isn't as good as you'd like it to be. Don't be surprised when they've got to borrow equipment from Surrey Fire Service, drones, or fire engines with long ladders, when there's an awful fire at Grenfell Tower. And the same goes for the police. Since 2010, we have lost from our city not just police stations and front counters like here in Bexley, but record numbers of police officers, community support officers, and police staff as well. 80% of the budget that the Met Police Service have comes from central government. Roughly speaking, 20% comes from City Hall by the taxes we raise. And we've lost year after year after year police officers from London. Violent crime in London started to go up in 2014. And not in 2016 or 2017, 2014, and across the entire country. So we've been lobbying the government to try and get more resources for our city. We're not waiting. In the meantime, we're taking steps to try and keep our city safe. And that includes the next question, violence against women and girls. A number of the homicides this year, the victims have been as a result of domestic abuse and domestic violence. They've been women stabbed inside their home by often violent male partners. And all the research that's done shows that often that's a sign of serious violence taking place on the streets as well. You'll have heard Chairman Tony Arbour talk about one of the campaigns the Assembly has is a domestic abuse register, because the ripple effect of those domestic violence isn't simply the woman who suffers, but others as well. The research we've seen from Scotland has shown that a child who experiences an adverse childhood experience is more likely to go on in adulthood to get involved in criminality and criminal gangs as well. So there's a reason why we do lots of work around violence against women and girls, including the announcement 2 weeks ago of an additional £15 million to invest in refugees and facilities across London to help the victims of violence against women and girls. And our Deputy Mayor Sophie Linden, the Police and Crime Commissioner, is going to be meeting you shortly to discuss these issues. But the last question in relation to stop, to use your words, wasting money on cycle lanes and use them on police. You know, each year there are 3,000 deaths or serious injuries on our roads. Now, I'm not saying one life is more precious than another one. Homicides are traumatic. I met today a grieving mum and dad who'd lost their son in South London as a consequence of stabbing. But I also met 2 weeks ago a grieving parent who'd lost their daughter as a consequence of a heavy goods vehicle running her over on a junction. Now, is one victim more important than another one because he lost his life through a knife injury and she lost her life through a heavy goods vehicle? No, they're both equally tragic. So we've got to invest in our roads and in our police. And it's not a zero-sum game. It's not a question of saying, you know what, we aren't going to make our roads safe because the government's given us funding, we're going to spend it there. And the reality is this, in relation to policing and public transport, we aren't getting the resources we need from central government. We have lost from the TfL budget in transport £700 million each year. Each year. We're the only city in the Western world not subsidised in our public transport system. So we've been cut in policing and we're being cut in transport for London. And by the way, we can reduce the marketing budget. Some of the marketing budget, and we're talking about tens of thousands, not millions and millions of pounds, that is being cut from central government. £1 billion cut from central government. And the simple thing the government can do is very simple, is they can reverse the cuts and give the police the resources they need to keep us safe.
Okay. I saw two Assembly members. I'm going to ask you to keep it very brief because there are more people that want to ask questions. In the order that I saw them, Assembly Member Hall, and then we'll come to Assembly Member Curtin. Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. I will be brief. I'm absolutely fed up with this. There's a gentleman over there that says we all need to feel safe. Yes, we do. We need more police officers on the road. Accept that completely. This mayor constantly just talks about Brexit, for which he's got no control whatsoever, and how terrible the lack of police numbers are. So we went to a great deal of trouble looking at expenses that we could take out to supply an extra 1,378 police officers on our London streets. What we need to remember is this mayor has got an £18+ billion budget. He could easily put his hand into his own pocket to make us safe.
Assembly Member Curtin, and if you could keep it brief, please.
Yeah, thank you. What the gentleman said there about the £169 million a year going into cycling infrastructure and cycle superhighways is absolutely right. And some people in the Mayor's office and in TfL have got this idea that you can cut congestion with a rapidly growing population by narrowing road space and building cycle lanes. And that just simply isn't possible. And it's a to spend so much money on that kind of thing, which isn't going to solve anything when we need, and we desperately need that money to resource our police service, is something that we simply must have to do. And sir, I put forward a budget amendment last month that said exactly that, and that's what we need to do to make London safer.
Okay, I'm going to take two more questions. There's a lady with a pink scarf just here, paddle 3. And there's a gentleman in the middle, which will probably also be paddle 3. So paddle 1, could you come round, please? Paddle 1. There's a gentleman in the middle of the front row, sorry, not the front row, the fourth row back with glasses and a black top. And the lady in the pink scarf there. Then I'm afraid we're going to have to move on after that. Can you keep your questions punchy, please?
Hold on, thank you. Mr. Khan, could I point out that all I've heard is you giving me reasons, which is this agency has cut money, central government has cut money, somebody else has cut money. You are my mayor, and this is our London Assembly. Right? So, can you please tell me in 2 sentences what you intend to do so that I can feel confident when my old people go out in the evening, because a number of old people won't go out anymore because they're too nervous, and when I can feel confident that young people, and especially young boys, are going to come home at night. What are you going to do?
Okay. The final question is, paddle 3 again, the final question is, oh, you've got the microphone, just here, gentleman here.
everybody here taking on board everything that's been said. What are you actually going to do? What are you for now? You know, everyone has actually made their points. You cannot just keep diverting it by pointing to what's happening with cuts. What are you actually going to do? You have £18 billion. You cannot be thinking that you are doing it. You can smile smugly, but you are not doing it the best that you can do. You don't. No one deserves that.
Okay. Okay, sir. I think you've made your point, sir. We need to give the Mayor the opportunity to answer, and then we're going to have to move on. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Gareth, for those two questions. As far as what City Hall can do in relation to fighting crime, it's quite a lot, and what we're doing is quite a lot. So let me give you some examples of some of the things we're doing from at City Hall. So what we've done is, in relation to the decline in police officer numbers, we're trying to manage the decline. So police officer numbers are going to go on year being cut as a consequence of the fact that 80% of the budget comes from central government. So what we're doing is using council tax and business rates to manage that decline. So rather than the numbers falling off a cliff edge, there'll be a managed decline. And until we have a reversal from the government, we will not be able to have an increase in the numbers that we need. And the good news is, finally, central government accepts there's a link between the cuts they've made and the increase in violent crime. And I've got to tell you this, the current Prime Minister was the Home Secretary when these cuts began being made, and that's why she's been in denial for the last few months. And so, you know, I don't mind people, you know, wanting me to take more action, and I'll take more action from City Hall. But part of my job as your mayor is to lobby the government for more resources that we desperately need. And you know what? There were police officers 5-6 years ago, hard-working officers, who stood where you are and said to the previous Home Secretary, you know what, Home Secretary? If you keep on making these cuts, it will affect safety. If you make these cuts on neighbourhood policing, it will affect police safety. If you cut neighbourhood policing, it may have an impact on terrorism. And she accused them of crying wolf. That is a disgrace, because they were proved right. And so I will listen to police officers over Prime Minister May every day of the week. And what are police officers saying? Police officers are saying that cuts have consequences. Police officers are saying that neighbourhood policing being hollowed out has had an impact on safety. Police officers are saying in 2010, each ward had one sergeant, you remember this, one sergeant, 3 police officers and 2 community support officers. When I became mayor, sergeant, gone, 2 CSOs gone, replaced by 1, and only 1 dedicated ward officer. So because of our investment, we're increasing the amount of neighbourhood policing. We can't do it by ourselves. Okay. We simply can't invest the monies we need in our city without government help.
Mr.
So
Mayor, I'm going to have to
there's
ask
a very good reason.
Well,
there's a very, it's a very
out of
serious
time.
issue. Well,
I understand, Mr. Mayor. 30 seconds, then we'll have to move on.
There's a very important point. The government has now accepted there is a link between cuts and crime going up. How do we know this? Because the Chancellor this week gave us a plaster to fix the gaping wound in relation to safety, which is £100 million. All that will pay for, sir, is overtime and some rest days that police officers have in the council to try and keep us safe. These are the same number of officers trying to keep us safe. We need more officers to keep us safe. So I'm going to carry on banging my head against a brick wall until we get the resources we need from central government. It's not about party politics. I know why Susan's embarrassed and Sean's embarrassed because they're Tories. I don't care whether you're a Tory or Labour.
Mr. Mayor,
I want more officers for our city.
Now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately we've finished this section. We ran over time a little bit, so we're going to have to move on to the next section, which is now air quality and environment. I'm a bit conscious that I haven't taken too many questions from the left of the hall, primarily because I can't see it very well, so I'm going to look that way. So, could we turn the lights down a little bit on that side of the hall, please, so I can see a bit better? Still can't see anything. Okay, so panel number 5, can we come to the gentleman with the blue pen in his hand? I can see a gentleman waving a red, or the handout for today, panel number 3, grey jacket, dark hair. And I'll now come over here, and there's a lady waving a red thing just there, panel number 2, and that is a lady in a dark top.
Thank you for that. We have 100,000 private hire drivers in London. 94% of them are from BAME community.
Sorry, sir, this has to be about the environment and air quality.
I'll get onto that, yeah? So basically, the mayor is introducing
you need
congestion
to go very
charge.
quickly, otherwise I'm going to stop you.
So basically, by introducing the congestion charge, how will that reduce the congestion? Because from your own assessment, it just states 1%, and from it's just going to reduce, it's going to increase congestion. So I don't know how the congestion charge would make a difference to the congestion.
This is strictly speaking
air
transport.
quality.
Right, okay, air quality. Oops. Okay, Mr. Mayor, when you answer that question in a moment, if you can condense that to air quality. Next one was paddle 3, I think, which is the gentleman in the middle with the grey jacket. No, that's the wrong person.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, the audience and Mayor. Thanks, Bexley Council.
Madam, please, could you sit down? I will call you in a moment, okay? Let the gentleman ask his question. No, sorry, you won't interrupt it. There are hundreds of people here, and they have the right to ask their question. Sir.
Thank you. So, thanks, Bexley Council, that give us the opportunity to ask Mayor the question. My question is, I'd like to ask you that I have heard that you already paid the taxi cab £65 million, and I am doing the representative of the 110,000 PHV drivers. I am one of them.
Sir, this has to be about air quality and environment.
The thing is, my very short question is, you know, you said that everything crime is going up.
No, sorry, sir. Can we cut this paddle off, please? This is not about the air quality and environment. Move on to the question number 2. It's paddle number 2 on the right-hand side. It's the lady in the middle.
Good evening. You say that we're going to get more buses in this part of London. Can we be sure that they will be the cleaner form of buses? Because at the moment, our buses very often have black smokes belching out the back of them, especially going up places like Shooters Hill. So if we're not going to get new buses, it's not going to help our air conditions.
Okay. Paddle number 7, there's a hand right in front of you. Can you go to that one, please, and then I'll take some answers.
Okay, so when are you guys going to invest on solar panels for public buildings, all our hospitals, schools, government offices, etc., etc., etc.?
Okay, Mr. Mayor. Madam, would you please sit down? The Mayor has now got the right to answer the questions. I will come... Madam, I'm warning you once. If I have to warn you again, you'll be escorted out of the building. Please sit down. Please take your seat. I'll come to you in a moment, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor?
So, in relation to the first question and the second question, who was ruled out of order, look, the air in London is a killer. There are thousands and thousands of premature deaths each year because of the poor quality air. Combination of nitrogen dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and particulate matter. Now, some people can keep their heads in the sand and pretend it's not happening, but it's happening. Thousands of premature deaths. There are children with stunted lungs, underdeveloped lungs because of the bad quality air. And there are adults with a whole range of health issues, from asthma to dementia to heart disease to cancer, directly attributable to the poor quality air. And you're right, there are 120,000 licensed private hire vehicles. When the congestion charge was first set up in 2003, there were, roughly speaking, 4,000 minicabs coming into central London. Some of them were unlicensed, and so to get them to be licensed, there was an incentive to make them exempt from the congestion charge. We now have on average on a daily basis 18,000 coming into the congestion charge area, many just driving around and around and around for their next ride. It's not sustainable. And by the way, the cost to the NHS each year is £3.7 billion. And we've got people taking days off sick because they're unwell. So there's an economic cost plus the misery to people who are made sick because of the poor quality air. So you can do nothing about it, or you can do nothing about it.
Please don't call out, ladies and gentlemen, otherwise you will be removed.
Or you can take action. So what we've consulted on is to remove the exemption that currently exists for private hire vehicles. And the evidence is that will lead to better quality air in London, but also less congestion as well. So some people, want to have less congestion by having no cyclists on our roads. Some of us believe the way to have less congestion is to have fewer cars on our road and have more people walking and cycling and using public transport. And so, and I'm not going to apologise for doing that. The second question from the back is a really important question about our buses. Actually, we noticed that the worst air was in those parts of London with the most buses, because the buses were just putting out the diesel fumes because they were very old buses. So in Putney, in Brixton, in Lewisham, and other examples, you mentioned Shooters Hill, the buses, in addition to the lorries and other vehicles, were contributing to the poor quality air. So since I've become mayor, last year I've had a policy, we do not buy any more diesel buses. The only buses we buy are electric powered, hydrogen powered or hybrid, but also we're retrofitting all our buses to make sure that they are compliant with the toughest air quality standards in Europe. And so we're doing that across London, and very soon every single one of our buses will be compliant with the ultra-low emission zone standards. Really important for the quality of air. And by the way, the good news is, we shows it makes a difference. So in Putney, where we had the first low-emission bus zone, the cleanest buses, the quality of air improved by more than 90% in just a few months. That shows a difference having cleaner buses can make. So in addition to having more buses in outer London, we want to make sure that they're cleaner as well. And the third question in relation to the left, listen, I know that the left are always ignored by those in some positions. But you're absolutely right. We've got to make sure that the homes we build are the best possible homes in relation to sustainability and green homes. And so what we've done is we've published a new draft London plan, which is making sure that we use renewable energies, sustainable energies, more solar panels going forward, and the environment strategy does so as well. One of the things I can do straight away is make sure the public land we have, Transport for London land, other land we have, lead by example. And so we're working with other parts of the government to make sure we lead by example with solar panels, and the new buildings we're going to have will have green gardens as part of the planning requirements, but also solar panels as well. It's really important that we build more affordable homes, but they're sustainable and fit for purpose for the 21st century. We can be the last generation that doesn't get it, or the first generation that gets it. I want to be the first generation that gets it.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick contribution from Assemblymember Russell, and then we're going to take some more questions. Assemblymember Russell.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, on the question of private hire drivers and the congestion charge, I was one of 3 Assembly members who voted against a motion to, that was trying to get the Mayor not to put... No, wait a minute. So I did vote for private hire to pay the congestion charge. There were 3 Assembly members who backed the Mayor on that. But I believe that the operators should be paying and not the drivers, who are some of the most exploited workers in London. In terms of the buses, I think the Mayor is absolutely right. We need to only have clean buses, but my goodness, we need those buses. There are 1/4 of the households in Bexley have no access to a car or van. So those residents must have access to a bus to be able to get around, to be able to get to work. And if we're going to clean up our air, we have got to make sure that people have options to use public transport rather than being forced into using a car for their everyday journeys. And then finally, on the solar panel question, over on the side of the room that hasn't had enough questions answered yet, we know that we are living in the time of climate emergency. We know that all the estimates of the time we have left to reduce our carbon emissions have been reduced by recent reports. We now need to take action more quickly. The Mayor has declared a climate emergency, which is fantastic. We definitely need to see more solar panels on Transport for London land, on trackside, alongside our rail systems, on all new housing, because this is one good way to be able to reduce our carbon emissions and to be able to provide affordable energy for Londoners.
Okay. Right, we'll take another set. Panel number 5, the lady in the black top right next to you. Panel number 7, I can see there's a waving hand at the back there. Move towards the back, please, panel number 7. There was a waving hand. Can you see the waving hand? Go there, please. And there's, right in front of me, there's the programme being waved next to panel number 3.
Right, thank you very much. My name is Yemi, and I've taken this particular topic to my MP, who is Theresa Pearce. I commute regularly to London, and of course I'm very concerned about the air quality around the Charing Cross area, most especially down the Strand, the Aldwych, and going into Holborn itself. I'm not sure if those areas are being brought to your direct attention, but desperately they need looking at, because there are days you just can't breathe when you're down there. Apologies for my outburst, but it's just out of sheer frustration. Just another topic quickly, which I've taken up with my MP directly, is to do with the safety of passengers on the buses.
Sorry, madam, that's not related to air quality and the environment. I'm going to have to rule that one out of order. We will take your first one. Panel number 7.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm a London taxi driver, and my question will cover disabilities, air quality, everything, age, safety, everything. I need to be able to get my customers to their door. We've been told to buy an electric taxi, which is costing me £65,000. Why are you excluding us from Tottenham Court Road, Bank Junction, Tooley Street and other roads? I need to be able to get my customers to the door. Disabled, we're 100% disability, what's the word? You know, we take wheelchairs accessible, elderly people, drunk people. I work through the night, I get people off the streets. Do not exclude us from any roads, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're straining the bounds of air quality and environment with that one, but Ms. Mayor, if you can manage it, that would be great. And then finally, number 3.
This ultra-low emission zone that's coming in 2020, is it? People at Bexley cannot go to the likes of Greenwich and Woolwich, where our doctors may be, without paying this extra charge. And TfL's statement was, if your car doesn't make the emission zone, buy a new one. You do realise people in this area cannot afford that. What is going to be done for the likes of us to get to our doctors, to get to our friends, to get to our partners, to get to our family, without having to pay this charge? It's not really acceptable for us to have to pay that. And most of us are struggling to make ends meet because of the cost of the transport, because of the cost of housing, and you're just putting more restrictions on us being able to get places and actually see people and have a social life, when if we can't get there and have a social life, we're going to all get depressed, and then that's a whole nother situation. But my question is, why is it acceptable to put this charge in when we can't afford it?
Okay. Mr. Mayor, we have 3 minutes, so if you can get those questions answered. In fact, we have 2 minutes. If you can get those done in 2 minutes, that would be great.
So in the first question, one of the concerns that we've had is the lack of availability to the public when the air is bad. And so in the past, some really important research has been buried away and hidden away. And we've made sure that we give you as much information as possible so you can plan. So for example, people who suffer from hay fever know when there's a high pollen count and can take action to address the symptoms of hay fever. What about poor quality air, those who suffer asthma or have a child or other issues? And so we're making sure that we make publicly available data about the quality of the air a day in advance when we know it. And we've made sure that all the bus stations, where there's Matrix, the tube stations, but also you can get the access on your phones, you know the air quality of data in relation to the air quality, so you can take action. And you're right, the parts of London you visit every day, Charing Cross, Aldwych, Strand, often have really bad air. And what we're trying to do is to improve the air there by reducing the amount of polluting vehicles. And actually, having more vehicles, like some people want to do, and have wider roads, leading to more vehicles, lead to more poor quality air. And some of the older vehicles are the most polluting air, so we've got to make sure we get them off those parts of London with the worst air, which causes the misery you're talking about. One of the things we're investing in is more air quality monitors as well. And so idling cars outside schools, big problem, but also vehicles dropping off things we order from the internet to places of work are also a big problem. We're trying to work with those to make sure we reduce those. Maybe at the end stage they can drop off by bike or by electric vehicles rather than by polluting vehicles as well. The second question, I mean, the questioner gave some examples of the huge advantages of the black taxi trade. Every single black taxi is accessible to those who are disabled. We've now made sure they will use contactless. We're trying to make sure more bus lanes are accessible to black taxis. We've also recruited more compliance officers to make sure people who are breaching the rules have action taken against them. And I want to thank the LTTA and Unite for making sure they help us with the marshalling that takes place. We've had more cab ranks introduced. But you're right in relation to the fact that if inadvertently, by reducing a taxi dropping off a passenger to their home, we may be providing a disservice to disabled Londoners. So some of the things you've mentioned aren't in our control. They're councils, and there's often a good reason. We carry on talking to the councils, and as I said, the Deputy Mayor is here, and she speaks to council leaders all the time, and we'll be responding in due course to the one that's under my control that you mentioned in relation to road. But you're right, we've got to balance the needs of other Londoners by the fact that the black taxis provide a unique service for many, many Londoners. You've got to accept a fare, for example. You can't say no like a PHV can. So I accept some of the challenges you face, and we're working with those that represent black taxis to address some of the concerns that you've articulated tonight in your question, and thanks for raising that question. The last question is a really important question about the ultra-low emission zone. There's some misinformation that we need to clarify. So the ultra-low emission zone that comes into this April only applies for the congestion charge area, April 2019. And so the most polluting vehicles, if you want to come into central London, will have to pay an additional fee to come into central London. Why? Because there's a direct link between the vehicle that's most polluting and the poor quality air in London. Actually, though, it's the poorest Londoners that suffer the worst air. When you look at a heat map of London where the worst air is, it's the poorest Londoners who own the fewest car, by the way. So in the most affluent parts of London, where there is more car ownership, there's better air. So this issue of fixing the air is an issue of social justice. It's poorer Londoners who suffer the worst air, who have the most asthma, who have children who have the biggest stunted lungs, and adults have cancer, dementia, and other sorts of issue. But you're right in relation to poor Londoners can't afford to change their vehicles. And so we're lobbying the government to help us with a national diesel scrappage scheme, because many of Londoners were encouraged to buy diesel by experts saying diesel emits less carbon than petrol. And so people were encouraged to buy diesel rather than petrol, and are now being told, well, diesel's polluting as well. And so we carry on lobbying the government to help us in relation to a scheme to help people move away from polluting vehicles to cleaner vehicles. Because the extension is not until 2021, I'm optimistic we'll get some progress from the government to help people like you to move away from older vehicles, because you can't afford to buy a new vehicle, to get a vehicle that's less polluting.
Okay. We've actually reached, sorry madam, you can't ask a supplementary, I'm afraid. I'm afraid we've run out of time on this section as well. We're going to now move on to the housing section. So can I see people who want to ask questions about housing? Number 5, just behind you, next to the lady in the red sweater, there's a gentleman with grey hair. There's a very obvious lady at number 3. Hello, Catherine, it's nice to see you. Gentleman with the glasses near panel number 1, please. So number 5 first, then number 3, then number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Your current London plan allows building development in back gardens. Can you explain how that is going to be acceptable in the London Borough of Bexley?
Okay, panel number 3 now.
Thank you, Gareth. And thank you very much for being here. I think it's great that you're here to answer all our questions. On housing, can I ask, how can you ensure, both as a mayor and as an assembly, that boroughs like Bexley uphold their responsibility for providing more social housing? A recent example is the development right next to Sidcup Station, 27 new flats, not a single social or affordable house amongst them. And the reason is the developers have provided £690,000 to get out of their responsibilities. So after traffic and engineering have reconfigured everything to accommodate those 27 new flats, we might be able to buy maybe a studio flat in Belvedere on social housing rent. So what I want to know is, what are you... Whoa! Oh, I'm so sorry, Onka. Gareth, it wasn't deliberate, I can promise you.
Well, Catherine, you always were capable of bringing the house
Anyway,
down.
my question is that the problem for boroughs like Bexley is that we face a large number of small-scale developments that don't fit into current guidelines, which means that we don't get the affordable and social housing that the borough needs. And I would like, you know, central London is running out of space, and we're going to be seeing more and more house building in places like Bexley. And it's going to be back gardens, it's going to be the large detached and semi-detached houses and their big gardens that are knocked down to build a dozen flats, and none of it will be for social or affordable housing.
Okay.
And I feel that we need to do something about this, because our children and grandchildren in Bexley are going to have to move out to Gravesham and Maidstone, as they are currently doing.
Okay.
So what are you doing to provide us with a future of housing for the next generation of Bexley residents, the children and grandchildren that need homes?
Thank you very much. And the gentleman over here that was by panel number 1.
Hello, Sadiq. My question is regarding veterans and ex-soldiers. Now, you said that the poorest always suffer because of the pollution. So why are ex-soldiers not priority A banding? What can you do more?
So there'll be a time... Is this a housing-related question?
It is housing. I'm talking about priority A. So I'm saying, why are people that have served this country and put their lives on the line left sleeping rough on the street? Because believe me, there are many of them.
Mr. Mayor.
Can I thank you for raising your question the way you did? Deputy Mayor James Murray is here for housing, and we're doing some targeted work around veterans. There are too many sleeping rough and waiting in council housing waiting lists, and James has been out to meet some groups doing some really good work, and we're doing some work in relation to helping veterans, not just rough sleepers, but making sure there is housing that is for veterans that can make a transition. We're also speaking to some of the charities that work with veterans. Most veterans make a good transition to civilian life. A small number don't, and the work James is doing is to help veterans. And so all my deputy mayors are here, so please do feel free to come at the end, and James will give you the details, and take your details, because you may have other ideas we're not thinking about. But it's part of the social contract we have with veterans. You serve our country and risk your life. The least we can do is make sure when you leave the army, the armed services, there is a decent home ready for you. And we will make sure we do that. So please speak to James afterwards, sir. In relation to the issue of the first two questions, they're linked really. And so it's worth reminding ourselves what the current law is and the current planning regime is. And it's possible now, under some of the permitted development rules, for a developer to build almost anything in back gardens without the need to go to the council for permission under permitted development. But also you, as a homeowner, can make extensions up to half the garden space without the need for any planning permission and build over green land. And so what we're saying is we should formalise this. If it's the case that you want to build on a garden, nobody's going to grab your garden from you. Anybody who's got a garden knows nobody can grab your garden unless you consent to it. But if you're going to build on green space, there's got to be a proper process, including a like-for-like replacement of green space that you're taking away, because if you're not careful, all the precious green space could be taken away. So in the new draft of the plan, we've got more protection for the green belt, more protection for the metropolitan open land, and more protection for green spaces. At the same time, there is a need to build genuinely affordable homes. One of the disagreements we have with James Brokenshire, the Secretary of State, is he's saying we should be building in London every year more than 100,000 new homes. Right? We say, we think roughly speaking it should be 65,000. But if he wants us to build 100,000 homes, and we're not going to build in the green belt, the obvious question is, where are they going to go? And if some councils are saying, not in my backyard, literally, but not in my borough, where are they going to go? And each borough has got to play its role in relation to the building of genuinely affordable homes. But the question is right, they've got to be genuinely affordable. Because we're seeing too many homes that have been given permission that are used as gold bricks for investors, often from overseas. And the last thing we need is more foreign investment buying homes that are left empty. We need to make sure we build homes for Londoners that are genuinely affordable to buy and rent. And by the way, this dodgy definition of an affordable home is one costing £450,000 or one that is 80% market value is nonsense. So we have ditched that dodgy definition. And the definition we have from City Hall, is one of three things. Either it's a home where you pay a social rent, council rent, roughly speaking, £150 for a two-bedroom property for a week, or it's a home where you pay a London living rent linked to average local earnings. So the London living rent in Bexley will be different to the London living rent in Camden. Or third, shared ownership, part buy, part rent. But we need councils to step up and play their role to ensure we start giving permission for the homes you so desperately need.
Okay. I'm going to take a contribution from Assembly Member Boff, and then I'm going to go for more questions. Assembly Member Boff.
I'm Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee, and currently the job of the Planning Committee is to oversee and represent the Assembly at the examination in public of the London Plan. And I must say that the Mayor has succeeded in uniting the Assembly. He's united the Assembly in opposition to very many elements of the London Plan, specifically those that encourage the development of one and two bedroom flats on small patches of land like back gardens. He's removed the protection from back gardens, and all this thing about permitted development is just not the case. He's removing the protection for back gardens. He is ensuring that those developments will always be one and two bedroom flats. He has removed from the London Plan and the housing strategy the targets that we used to have for family homes. Now, if I can just remind you that there are 360,000 young people, children, being brought up in overcrowded conditions in London, and their plight is not going to be solved by a rash of one and two bedroom flats. We need family homes built on plots of land so our young people can thrive, not squeezing them in to tiny little boxes and expecting them to make do. The Mayor's London Plan is little short of a declaration of war on the suburbs. He doesn't like that it's green, he doesn't like the way it votes, and so his plan is to ensure that he builds any opposition out of the suburbs. And ladies and gentlemen, I cannot emphasize to you enough how important this subject is to the future character of boroughs like Bexley that value their green, value their environment, but also value their young people as well.
Okay. Right, we've got 6 minutes left on this section. I'm going to take two questions and then go to the Mayor for an answer, and if we can get some more in at the end of that, I'll take it. Panel number 8, there's a hand I can see, dark hair. I'm not going to guess if you're a man or woman because I can't see you from this distance. And gentleman here who's waving at me with the white shirt, so panel number 3. So panel 8 first and then panel 3.
Hi, I am male, just to let you know. You said earlier, Mr. Mayor, that the Assembly would be helping councils as much as possible to build affordable housing, but the figures that came out last month are that 0 affordable houses have been built in Bexley over the past year. And that's just shameful, really. That's just really sad. So I just want to know what you're going to do about that.
Okay, panel number 3.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I wanted to ask, I know Assembly Member Copley's done a lot of work on the right to buy. Now, it's great that you're going to build 11,000 new council homes, but when the tenants move in, is within a year or two, they exercise their right to buy, that 11,000 goes down to 5,000. Like where I live in Greenwich, before the right to buy, we had 30,000 homes. We've now got short of 20,000. That's 10,000 that have gone through right to buy. What are you doing in City Hall, what can you do in City Hall to ensure that you get rid of right to buy? Because right to buy, if you keep building council homes, they will just disappear through right to buy, and that is part of the housing crisis.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to give you the first bite at this, but I'd like to bring Assembly Member Copley because he was name checked as well. So, Mr. Mayor. You go first, and then I'll bring Assembly Member Copley.
Well, listen, thank you for both those excellent questions. So we've reached a deal with 27 of the 32 boroughs to start building over the next 4 years 14,000 council homes, and Bexley is not one of them. And that's something you've got to hold up, because something you've got to raise with Bexley in relation to why it is they don't believe in council homes for ordinary Londoners. Why do they want to allow building private developments that can't be afforded by many local residents? And it's really important that the council's held to account in relation to those issues. And I make this point in relation to social rented homes. In the year I became mayor, the pipeline I was given from the previous mayor in City Hall funded 0 social rented homes from the previous mayor. Now, some people don't like talking about the previous guy, and you can tell why, but the legacy he left was awful. The cupboard was bare. What are we doing? Last year, we began building in London more homes that are genuinely affordable with a new definition than ever before, more than 12,500. Out of those, 2,800 were homes which were a social rent, more than the previous 4 years put together, and more than the rest of England put together last year. This year, and that was a record, this year I've said to the team, we're going to break that record, not 12,500, I want to start 14,000 genuinely affordable homes, and so we're trying to make progress to try and get there as soon as we possibly can. But we need to work with councils, and we're doing as best as we can with the councils. But the second question raised a really important point in relation to right to buy. So since right to buy was introduced in 1980, in London, 300,000 former council homes, 300,000 have been sold off. They've been replaced not by 300,000 homes, but by 60,000 homes. So we're losing the supply of affordable homes that Londoners need and selling off what we've got, is selling off the family jewels. Now, there's no problem, right to buy, if you're building homes to replace them, but we haven't done that. Successive governments have failed to do that, and some councils are far, far worse than other councils as well. And what's important is we make sure that the deal we do in relation to new homes, we don't allow them to sell them under right to buy. So the funding we're giving to councils has a condition. You can't sell them off under right to buy going forward. And we're making sure when it comes to estate regeneration, that if any home is demolished, it's got to be replaced and some, not just one for one, and some as well. And I'll let Gareth Tom answer the next bit, because Tom's done some really good work in relation to this area and deserves huge credit for the work that Tom's done. But over to you, Tom.
Assemblymember Copley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, a report I published earlier this year looking into right to buy found that 42% of all the homes sold under right to buy in London are now owned and let out by private landlords. These were homes that were built for the public good, let out at social rents, now let out for private profit at market rents. And the real insult is, some of them are being let back to the very councils that were forced to sell them in order to house homeless families, and councils across London are spending £20 million a year at least renting back their former homes, which they were forced to sell at a discount. I don't think that makes any sense whatsoever. And we don't want, I'm very pleased that City Hall for the first time is funding the development of new council housing. But we don't want to end up losing homes at the same time as we're building them. It's time to end the right to buy.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've run out of time on housing. We're now going to move on to talking about London's economy. I'm looking for 3 questions. Gentleman right in front of paddle 3. Towards paddle number 6, there's a gentleman at the end with his hand up. And there's paddle number 5, there's a gentleman holding the programme rolled up, grey jacket, glasses. Okay.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you think it's right that TfL dishes out millions of pounds this year to the tune of £10.8 million to support the same unions which also fund your electoral campaign? Do you not think this is a conflict of interest?
We're slightly straining the economic argument there, but we'll allow that in. I can't remember where the second one was. I think it was over here. It was no, it wasn't. It was, yes, correct. Have we got the microphone there? Panel number 6.
Assemblymember Bailey, you described Brexit as a great opportunity despite the negative impact, the extremely negative impact that it's having on London's jobs and growth. Do you stand by those comments?
And then the final question.
Okay.
I saw in your economic development plan you were committing about £100 million of funding to start-ups, particularly those that would do things for London's general good. That's great to get things off the ground, but what can you do to encourage councils to buy from those companies so that the company's got customers and consequently is a sustainable business that will give you a return or give Londoners a return on their investment and create further employment?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, you go first, and then Assemblymember Bailey had a question directly to him. We'll come with him next.
Sure. So Transport for London, for the first time since it was formed in 2000, is reducing its costs. So in the first 3 years of my mayoralty, 2016, 2017, 17, 18, 18, 19, we've reduced operating costs because we have to, because the government's taken away our operating grant. The biggest transformation in TfL's history, yet strikes have gone down by more than 65% because we respect those who represent workers in Transport for London. I don't think trade unions are the boogeyman here, because I think trade unions, history tells us, have played a crucial role in relation to improving the employment rights of everyone, health and safety in the workplace, maternity rights, paid leave, health and safety, these issues that I'm really proud trade unions have done and have led to a more civilised city and a more civilised country. So there are some people that want to bash the trade unions, some of them are here, but I don't bash trade unions. I think it's really important to work with them to bring about transformational change, but to avoid strikes on our public transport. Strikes is bad for workers, it's bad for those who work in London, but it's also bad for Transport for London. And I want to apologise for meeting regularly with the trade unions, just trying to see if we can resolve things amicably rather than there being strike action, which causes huge misery to Londoners, those going to appointments and to our businesses as well. And I'm sorry that you don't agree with that point of view. In relation to small businesses, it's really important to recognise the role small businesses play in our city. More than 99% of businesses in London are small to medium-sized businesses. More than half of Londoners will work for a small or medium-sized business, so we've got to support them. And so we're doing a number of things in City Hall to support small businesses that weren't done before. We've set up a new growth hub to make sure we support small businesses, to make sure some of them can't get access to big companies to sell their products in relation to things they've got in a procurement chain. We're helping them do that. We're also helping small businesses sell overseas. We've got an International Mayor's Business Programme so they can meet venture capitalists, meet others overseas to export overseas as well. And we're also helping them in relation to how they prepare for Brexit, in relation to the supply chain, in relation to selling things to Europe and bringing things in. But also we're getting the advice from small businesses about how we can train up the next generation of Londoners to have the skills for the jobs in relation to the small businesses need. And also we're giving small businesses capital in relation to expanding. But your question is really important about how we encourage local authorities and others in their supply chain to use small businesses. So one of the things we're working on is something called the Good Work Standard. And what we're doing is use our procurement power, Transport for London, the Met Police Service, the London Fire Brigade, the GLA, but also with councils to use the power of procurement to support small businesses. And whatever your view on Brexit, actually we've got to realise that it could be an opportunity for some small businesses to get some of the business that they didn't have access to. So we're going to help small businesses bid for contracts they otherwise couldn't have access to, but also persuade councils when it comes to some of the services they provide to look at small businesses going forward. Really, really important.
Okay, Assemblymember Bailey.
Brexit is something that the public voted for. It's a very democratic vote, and the public voted to leave. When you're talking about leaving the EU, of course I want to support London and bang the drum for London and make sure that we benefit economically. We shouldn't be using Brexit as a wedge to drive communities apart. It's an opportunity for many of the small businesses in London to change the way they operate and get a slice of some of the big business that goes on in London. And of course, when you talk to business, they don't identify Brexit as their biggest threat. They identify things like housing and transport. So when I say it's an opportunity for London, it is, because this is a thriving city that will prosper whatever happens with the outcome of Brexit, and we have to view it in that way. If we keep talking the country down, if we keep talking London down and suggesting that we're going to fold up once Brexit happens, then we won't get anywhere at all. I think our job as the Assembly and the job of any mayor is to say to London, there's always been challenges to business in London. We have always prospered, and this is just another one, and I'll do everything in my power to help small and big business alike be prosperous into the future. That's what I mean when I say Brexit is an opportunity for London. It's an opportunity to come together.
Okay, I'm going to take some more questions. Gentleman with the straw boater in the middle here has had his hand up for the whole time. Panel number 2, if you could come forward. Sorry, panel number 1. There's a gentleman here with a sort of a greyish tank top, white shirt. We'll go there. That's 3-1. And there's a gentleman at the back near panel number 6, blue shirt. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name's Milo Alexander. I'm a data scientist and I'm a startup. I'm a co-founder of a startup that does AI machine learning solutions for governments and large enterprises. And I'm glad that you've mentioned this topic because in actual fact, we've been trying to get some government funding for the project that we're getting on the way. It's actually a commercial, scalable product that revolutionizes the NHS, the housing and so forth. But the problem that we're having is when we go for the round of funding, we have actually discovered today that we are at level 7, meaning that normally some companies start at 1 to 9, but we're at level 7 because of that. The sort of funding that we need is different. So what we're basically trying to say, we can revolutionize the NHS, we can revolutionize the smart city infrastructures that you have because it's decentralized ledgers and so forth, and we're actually putting together a plan to help entrepreneurs and especially, just a moment. So we actually have all of these things in place, but what I want to know is, we want to help the government, we want to help you to help the people of Great Britain because a lot of the money that we're being offered is coming from foreign investors and we don't want to take the money from foreign investors. So we want to find out today if we can do something, see what we have in place and so we can move forward to help the disgruntled youth of this country to make a way forward.
Okay. The next question was from panel 1.
Yes, hello, good evening. I have a question regarding to, actually it is interrelated. It is a socio-economic inequality that might lead some of your policies. I'm talking about Mayor Sadiq and the TfL. And it has 2 sides. One is the ultralight emission zone and the other one is really congestion charge we have had, but it is economic issue. And the reason I said is that actually, why are you actually excluding private hire, which has actually invested a lot of cars which are semi-electrical, while black cabs, which I actually consider they are our colleagues actually, by the way, that they have actually 5 times more pollutant than the cars we have, which are Toyota Priuses. Isn't it a contradictory actually in terms of actually the clean air you are talking about? And that it will lead to socio-economic inequality, which actually really I think is quite contradictory. So why is it happening actually? That is my real question. Okay. And the mayor also talked about those people on the poor people actually are the ones who are going to suffer. Because if I simply talk about myself now, I have invested a car which actually needs a plug-in where I cannot actually charge in London, but at the same time you are going forward actually for the money, rather than actually implementing the issues that actually leads us into economic prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And panel number 6, right at the back.
Given that some people's jobs have disappeared as a result of Brexit, what things are the mayor thinking of doing to replace those jobs, bringing jobs from elsewhere into the UK?
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so thank you for all the 3 questions. The first question is really important because we in London have some incredibly talented people starting incredible businesses, but they aren't being given the support they need to flourish and to thrive. Scale-ups, accelerators, and on. So in City Hall, we set up a special team as part of the Growth Hub to help businesses like yours. So before we go, can you please take a card from one of the gentlemen in the front? So my Director of Policy is here. Come to the front row afterwards. He'll give you our card. Get in touch with us because we've also arranged meetings between London businesses and venture capitalists. Because often you can't get a meeting with a VC. Well, we can for you. And what Rajesh Agrawal, my Deputy Mayor for Business, has done is he's organised a number of face-to-face. Because if you can pitch your idea to somebody with capital, you can persuade them why it's worth investing in. They want to invest in British. They want to invest in London, by the way. And you can do your sales pitch to them. We've had a couple of those already, very successful. They're in demand. And take the card from my Director of Policy at the front here. All this, and you then email us. We'll arrange that face-to-face. But anybody else who's got a small business, go to the London Growth Hub. There are details there, but I want you to make sure you get in because we're particularly focused on AI going forward, and Tech Week's coming up as well. So I want to make sure that you get in on the action. Really important. The second issue is, look, this idea that only some parts of the transport sector has got to play a part is not true. Everyone's got a role to play, whether you're a private hire vehicle, whether you're a plaque taxi, whether you're a bus, whether you're a heavy goods vehicle. Everyone has a role to play to clean up the area in London because we have a public health emergency. And so if you speak to black cab drivers, they will complain that we're encouraging them to have electric vehicles, the LEVs. And that the grant we're giving them is not enough to move towards a 65,000 new taxi. You speak to heavy goods vehicles, they're complaining that we're obsessed by road safety and making sure their vehicles are as clean as possible, and we're charging them £100 to come into central London. And you as a private hire vehicle driver are complaining about the exemption being taken away from the congestion charge. Let me be clear. I will not apologise for trying to clean the air in London to make sure there are less premature deaths in our city directly caused by the bad air. I'm not going to apologise for that. You know, when you meet children who will have permanently smaller lungs, stunted lungs because of the bad quality air, we've got a choice. We can just ignore it like previous generations did before 1950, or we can be brave. And you know, the same thing was said about the great smog in the 1950s. Why are you bothering trying to clean up our factories in relation to this great smog? And the idea that politicians then weren't going to be brave is ridiculous. Politicians were brave, and we cleaned up these poisoning factories from central London and moved them elsewhere, or made them cleaner. And the same is going to go for polluting vehicles, and we're going to clean them up. We're going to make sure our city is safer for those who breathe this stuff in. And the last question about Brexit. Look, it's really important to understand the consequences of us leaving the EU. Now, look, we've had the referendum, I accept that, right? But even those who voted to leave the EU can't possibly say the negotiations have been good ones, right? The one thing those of us who campaigned to stay in the EU, and those like Sean Bailey who campaigned to leave, must agree on is it's chaos. And Theresa May's got to get a grip. Because if we're not careful, we could leave the European Union with the worst of all worlds. And the worst of all worlds will lead to jobs leaving our city. Construction jobs, NHS jobs, social care jobs, jobs in hotel, jobs in restaurants, and none of us want that. And we want to make sure we've got the construction workers to build the homes we need. We want to make sure we've got the helpers to help the elderly in relation to social care and the nurses in the NHS. So my message to the government is very, very simple. If you yourselves can't negotiate a process through Parliament that gets a good deal with the European Union, that can't make progress, let the British public take back control. You know, because okay. I can't think of anything more democratic than the public taking back control. What are they scared of?
Okay. Right, there are... I'm going to allow 2 more minutes in this section, then we'll go to the final section. There are 2 people that have had the programmes up over there. If you'd like to raise them again, you just both put them down, otherwise I won't call you. Okay, no, they're down. In which case, lady here with the red scarf around her neck, paddle number 5, you can come forward. And I'll take one other person. Gentleman with the black shirt waving at me with the white armband on, paddle number 3. If you can make the questions quick, please, and the Mayor, if you can make your answers quick as well.
Hi, you said talk about the public taking back control. I believe if you want a second referendum, the choice is going to be between May's deal and Remain, and May's deal is pretty much remaining anyway. And to speak against the referendum result and say it has to have a second referendum means you're not honouring, and the parliamentarians are not honouring the first result.
Okay.
Mr. Khan, you often talk about London having voted to remain. You're in the London Borough of Bexley. 63% of us voted to leave.
Okay, thank you. And the final question on this section was the gentleman just here.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mayor. All right. First of all, I'm proud to be a Londoner, and I expect, like, London should stand an example to the entire world. We have so many opportunities, so many things. Still, there is problems in security, problems in job, youngsters, and there is no clarity. It's very hard for my generations or younger generations in London to say, yes, it's a safe place to live, and they can secure their jobs and life. So I request Mayor that, like, for a country like Dubai, the king says, I heard somewhere from the management, he built whatever 10 times bigger than in terms of achieving like the foreign like investments or anything. So London is a great city. It needs to stand as an example to the whole world. For that, I'm sure we can build a better place, better secure place for the youngsters and everyone who living here. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, as concisely as possible.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the last question was.
To be honest, neither am I, but do your best.
Okay. So, can I deal with the first question?
Yes,
so, Theresa May, if she's a Democrat and she believes in votes counting, when she lost by a record amount the meaningful vote, you'd have thought she'd accept the verdict. What did she do? She came back a second time and lost again. And what does she plan to do next week? Come back a third time and let's hope lose again. But let me be clear, look, if it was the case that the government was negotiating with the EU in a sensible manner, I'm pragmatic. I accept the results of the British public. The problem is this, we've got two choices. We've got a bad Brexit deal, or we've got no deal whatsoever. That's a million miles away from what was promised 2.5 years ago. This is damaging the NHS. It is making our children and grandchildren poorer, and is, I think, a bad mistake. Now, look, you can sit silently by, or you can
ladies
stand
and gentlemen,
up and
I know this is something you're very passionate about, but please don't shout. If you shout out, you will be removed, so please don't. Mr. Mayor.
Now, my message to the Prime Minister is very simple. I think it's really important that Parliament, if it's possible, does a deal with the European Union and it gets through Parliament. But rather than us falling off a cliff edge on March the 29th, what the Prime Minister should do is withdraw Article 50 to give us time to negotiate a good deal with the EU, and if Parliament's in gridlock, give the British public a say.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're into the final 10 minutes of the meeting, so I'm going to allow about 8 minutes for the next section, and that is a bit of a free-for-all. You can ask any questions you like. Gentleman, panel number 1, the gentleman there waving the thing who just gave a fist bump because I've seen him. There's a gentleman jumping up and down here, panel number 3, and there are 2 over there. I'm going to go to panel number 7. Can you go towards the end of the row? Panel number 7? No, back. The red panel that's waving at me. Keep waving, please. No, move down, move down. Panel number 7, move down. Right next to you. Okay. So.
Thank you. I'm a local teacher, and there's a recruitment crisis in education. And in Bexley, it's worse. Now, I work in Bexley Heath, and if I worked in Eltham, I'll get paid £4,000 more. So, are our children worth teachers who are paid £4,000 less? Our children in Bexley deserve the very best. Gareth Bacon, you're a representative from Bexley. What are you doing personally to deal with this?
Panel number 3, which was, I think, in the middle here. Yeah.
Hello. Oh, good. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. So, I'm a teenager, and I'm a victim of knife crime.
Now, it's gotten to the point where I cannot see the killings and attacks of my brothers and sisters, okay? Now, Sadiq Khan, do you think, do we have the right to live without fear? Do we have the right to live? And if so, what are you going to do to ensure that innocent people like myself and the people all around here are safe? Okay, you are our leader. Okay, we count upon you. Okay, now I can't even walk up on the street without being not safe. Okay, so we really need your help. Okay, and if you don't do anything, then we, as the carers of this country, will do something, because we cannot tolerate this. Enough is enough. Thank you.
Okay, panel number 7.
I'd like to ask the Mayor about the delays we've had on Crossrail. It was delayed in December 2018, and now it looks as if it may not even open 2019. And also with the £2 million overspend, I'd like to know this would be a very good investment, because Crossrail will also improve the area, encourage people that are perhaps living in London that would like to move further out with the air pollution, and also Crossrail, it would take people either into Heathrow with the pollution that you've been talking about this evening. Surely to open Crossrail would improve the air pollution for quite a lot of people in the surrounding areas.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, slightly unusually, I think, in the history of People's Question Time, I've been asked a direct question as the chairman, so I'll take that one first, if I may, and then I'll come to you. Both of my parents were school teachers. I have 3 uncles, 2 aunts, and 1 sister who are also school teachers. I'm one of 4 children who grew up in a family where both parents were school teachers in the state sector. So you don't need to tell me anything about teachers' salaries. I firmly understand exactly what you're talking about. Unfortunately, the role of the London Assembly doesn't extend to teachers' pay. I'll be more than happy to talk to you directly afterwards if you'd like to come and see me, and I'll be happy to listen to any ideas you may have on that. Mr. Mayor, would you like to deal with the other 2 questions?
The Chair, Gareth, is right. We've got no direct role over teachers' pay, but we've got a choice of sitting silently by or lobby the government to sort it out. And I think we should lobby the government to sort it out, don't you? And so what I've seen over the last 8 years are our schools facing massive cuts in their budgets. We have some schools that are now closed down at Friday lunchtime because they can't afford to run 5 full days a week. When I used to go to school, we used to have teachers providing facilities after school hours and also on Saturdays as well. Most schools have lost that. And then we complain when young people without constructive things to do get involved in things that aren't constructive, you know, whether it's criminal gangs or whether it's other things as well. There is a problem with the London waiting allowance. There is a problem in relation to the way teachers are paid. There is a problem in relation to affordable housing. And one of the things that we're doing is lobbying the government and the Department for Education to make sure we can support more teachers to come in London. You will know, sir, we've got a big problem recruiting teachers in London and then retaining them. The number of newly qualified teachers who come to London and leave in the first 3 years is ridiculous. They spend all this time training and they don't stay because of the challenges that you've alluded to, pay, the stress, the lack of appreciation. And so one of the things that I'm doing with my Deputy Mayor, Joanne McCartney, is lobbying the government for more resources in this area, but also trying to encourage teachers to stay in London after they've come and progress to becoming senior teachers as well. The second issue raised by the young man is an issue that concerns all of us who are parents, actually. And I've got 2 teenage children and raising them in London. This fear you have when your kids leave home and are out late at night, are they safe? And all of us have stayed up late waiting for our children to come home. It's a perennial concern that all of us have had. And that's one of the reasons why it's personal to many of us in relation to safety of Londoners. When you've been to the number of funerals that I have of young Londoners whose lives have been lost too early, when you've met the numbers of grieving parents and siblings that I've had who will never stop grieving for the loss of their loved one, you do take it personally. Of course you do. And so one of the things that we work upon is what more can we do as an administration to make sure we're as safe as we can be. And so we're using all the tools in the toolkit. We're learning the lessons from Glasgow and Scotland and Boston and Chicago in relation to a public health approach we've set up in London. England's first violence reduction unit, bringing together not just the police and City Hall, but the NHS, schools, pupil referral units, social services, the probation service, local authorities, and many others to prevent a young person entering a life of criminality or violent crime. On the other hand, working with the police, you know, our police work so hard. We have few police officers. They're overstretched and then under-resourced. They do overtime and they cancel their rest days to make sure we're safe. We funded a violent crime task force of 300 officers who target the highest knife crime areas of London to make sure they do targeted, intelligence-led stop and search, taking off our streets, guns and knives and weapons, making more than 3,000 arrests, just this one unit, to make sure we lock away people who are dangerous. But the causes of violent crime are complex. There are deep-seated problems. I'm not going to pretend we can just arrest ourselves out of this, and nor can the police by themselves do it. There's a great African proverb: it takes a village to raise a child. I think all of us have a role to play to address the issue of the increase in violent crime over the last few years, not just in London, but across England and Wales as well. And I speak not just as the Mayor of London and your leader in your words, but as a dad with 2 teenage kids as well. The third question in relation to Crossrail is also really important. So, in fact, it's not 2 million overspend, it's 2 billion overspend in relation to Crossrail. Crossrail 1, when she opens, will increase the public transport capacity of our city by more than 10%. The link will be from Reading going all the way to Shenfield in the east, and we're hoping, working with the council and the government, to extend from Abbey Wood to Ebbsfleet, Gravesend as well in the future. It's really important. What I've said to the new chair, who I trust, and the new chief executive is, look, don't try and be optimistic for the sake of trying to please me. Be honest with me and with the Secretary of State for Transport. When do you think you can open the central section? We want safety, of course, we want reliability. How soon can you open it? They think they can tell me next month how soon the central section will open. Let's wait and see whether they can. What's clear to me is we've got to invest in public transport, not just in Crossrail, more buses in outer London has been referred to. We've got to invest in relation to making sure that we have the commuter line that's run by South Eastern given over to TfL to improve the services. Our population is growing. That by itself is not a problem, but we've got to plan for it. And part of the planning for it is to improve public transport, not just in Bexley, but across London as well.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid I've been advised that we are now out of time. I can't take any more questions. But I would remind you that any of you who tried to get in and ask a question, say who I wasn't able to call, please do feel free to submit written questions. They will be submitted to the Mayor's office and you'll get a reply within 6 weeks. Can I thank you all for participating and attending today? A full transcript will be available on the GLA website at www.london.gov.uk in a few days' time, and written answers will be provided to all questions within 6 weeks. Please remember to complete the feedback form and post them in the boxes on the way out. Good night and have a safe journey home. Thank you all very much.
It's time to back the plaque and make sure more women get the recognition they deserve.
I was just looking, I've got a guy here on Twitter who logs a lot of the tweets about cyclists. When I'm driving and I see a cyclist, I always want to swerve into them and nudge them off.
People don't like to be medicalised, they don't want labels.
Suffering with depression, I'm always indoors. All I want to do is stay indoors. And when the doctor suggested that, it helped me a lot with my depression.
If the government put him on a domestic abuse register, it could save a lot of other women and possibly save their life.
London is proud, loud, hard as nails. Suited and booted, deep-rooted, undisputed. London is Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, Sikh. Magnifique. London is European, grand, wild, magical, nuts. London is hungry guts. Late night bagels, all the curry verse. Avocado on toast, Sunday roast. London is non-stop, around the clock, grime and rap. Mind the gap. London is fearless, outrageous, courageous, spacious, expressive, impressive, the history, the future. London is anyone. London is everyone. London is open.
It's time to back the plaque and make sure more women get the recognition they deserve.
I was just looking, I've got a guy here on Twitter who logs a lot of the tweets about cyclists. When I'm driving and I see a cyclist, I always want to swerve into them and nudge them off.
People don't like to be medicalised. They don't want labels.
Suffering with depression, I'm always indoors. All I want to do is stay indoors. And when the doctor suggested that, it helped me a lot with my depression.
If the government put him on a domestic abuse register, it could save a lot of other women and possibly save their life.